Welcome to the first ever episode, the pilot episode of the ARIISE Partners podcast, where we put founders first. With me today is a longtime friend, former panel partner, and coach partner in Martin Barnes. He has a venture called 8 Seconds to Connect, which coaches founders on pitches, on presentations, on a whole host of things. And he knows much more about it than I do, which is why he's here to talk about it today. Martin, welcome, and talk a little bit about what you're up to right now.
Hey Ryan, it's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me as guest number one on the podcast. I love it. My background, it's not pitching, it's not public speaking, it's not presenting. For me and for the people I work with, it's intentional communication. Because when people go, hey, what do you do? And I say, I'm a pitch coach. Some of them recall and go, ooh, pitching, too salesy. I'm not a startup, or I'm not, I don't want to be that. And then if I go presentations, everyone's like, yeah, great, another presentation. I'd rather do anything than that. And then public speaking is just full of, what's that Jerry Seinfeld joke that people would rather be in the coffin than giving the eulogy because they don't want to do any public speaking?
That's not far off the truth for most people. I think it's a universal fear that the number one fear of most humans is public embarrassment.
Exactly, because we're exposed and vulnerable and all those things. And so each of those 3 Ps, pitch, public speaking, presenting, has so much baggage that I find myself having to undo all of the mental baggage. And so I'm going backwards. And I don't want to go backwards, I want to go forwards. I want to talk about how do we communicate. And so this idea of intentional communication, lean into it and read the room and read the situation, and then use your words to close the gap.
Well, that's vital for everybody. I don't think I've ever been in a position where I didn't have to talk about something from middle school until now. And whether you're selling an idea or even communicating your criticism of an idea, you have to be able to get a synthesis and get your words out and make people buy into it without alienating, right? Alienation is probably one of the key factors of keeping people engaged in any conversation.
100%. And I mean, when we first met on the panel for the pitch event that we were both at, what really struck me about you was that the first thing you'd say to people is like, I'm not going to say the easy stuff because that doesn't help us progress. I'm going to give you the hard stuff. And there's going to be no sugarcoating, so are you ready? And then you'd wait, and people go, yeah. And then you'd give them really constructive feedback. And I was like, wow, that's so refreshing, because most people go, oh, that was really good, and you did really well. And it's like, no, you probably didn't, and that's not really going to help. We need to get to the meat. And you did that so well, because it was really authentic, and it was just straight to the point. And I thought, wow, this is different level feedback. So that to me was a real... one of the many experiences that's made me realize that intentional communication allows you to read the room, read the situation, and use your best words to achieve your goals.
You have more study in this subject than I do, but there's a word called discernment, right? Where you get a vibe, an energy, a feel, a read. All those words are similar to the same thing. But it's like that level of discernment where you can walk into a space, be in a space, exist in a space, talk in a space, and you have a feel of what people's reactions are. Body language, eye contact, lack of eye contact, tone of voice, shuffling their papers, looking at their phone. What would you tell founders who are listening? What would you tell them when you're in that room and you feel something's off with potentially one or more than one of the listeners? How do you get them back in without ruffling the other's feathers? Because, right, say that 80% of the room is in, but 20's not. How do you get the other 20 back?
Pause. There is nothing more powerful than a pause, because it creates anticipation. And leaders go at their own speed. And when you pause, people kind of go, oh, what's up? They look up, they re-engage, because they're expecting noise to fill the space. And if you do the opposite, then you're going to sort of create intrigue and curiosity. And it also gives you a moment to think, what hook can I use to really tune people back into this moment? And a pause is content. but we often feel so anxious of the moment that we rush, and that will push people further away.
Good. So pausing. I've heard this before. Like if you're on a date and the person isn't engaging with you, they look at their phone or whatever. Just stop talking and wait, because they'll feel an awkwardness, and then they'll. But when they come back in, there's another level of adult human interaction that I've witnessed in my own career. If they're even indirectly called out for not engaging, then they try to over engage. So let's swing the pendulum in the same idea. Now you have people who are over engaging and not letting the presenter, the founder, the business owner get their stuff out. What recommendation do you have if they're coming over the top with their their applause and their comments and their ooh, ah? Like, how do you get them to get back to a active listener, not an active co-speaker?
That's a really good one, because I was in an event the other day. There was a whole panel, and one woman just wouldn't shut up. She just was really enjoying the moment. When she did speak, when it was her turn to speak, and she said stuff, it was great. But she was just kind of getting carried away with the moment, and she just didn't want the spotlight to go to anybody else. And I just remember I made notes in my book, and I was like, there's nothing that makes you look less professional than being too eager at the wrong time. Because yeah, oh man, we can only learn that the hard way, because you have to feel it.
I was the energetic Energizer bunny running through walls, let's go, let's go, let's go guy for probably 15 years of my career. And then someone pulled me aside when I started raising millions of dollars, and they're like, stop doing that. You look desperate. And I'm like, no, that's just me, man. I'm rolling. Let's go. And no, don't do that.
Oh man, I had somebody pull the timeout sign on me, get up and say, you've blown this, and walk out. And just let me stew in this, like, oh, what happened? And then they messaged me and they said, you had it.
Well, I tell
convinced.
founders, I coach our founders, our clients, I coach them that if they're in a position where they're being disrespected or undercut, to walk out. I've done it before, only twice in my whole career. I've coached founders to do it. A great anecdote is there was once I was pitching Poser, which is one of the apps that my company holds. And it's a fitness app, stay at home. And it hit, we were designing it 2 months before COVID hit. Then COVID hit and everyone came into the space and we got obliterated. So Poser just never took off. It could have. It was really, really good. But it was bad timing. But I was pitching that for the first couple months, trying to raise a couple $100,000 to finish the product and get it into the market and start raising larger capital and start making cash flow. And a guy said, you'd have to fall out of this building not to make money from this idea. Your valuation's insane. I'll give you $100,000 for half of it. And I was like, I let him finish. I didn't roll my eyes. I didn't swear or anything. And I literally, it's what I coach my founders to do. Stand up. If it's a sit down meeting, stand up. If it's everyone standing around the room, stop what you're doing and start walking towards the door. Make a physical gesture that there's a difference in the room. And I shook his hand and I said, thank you very much. I don't want to waste any more of your or my time. And he called me back in the room and we got a deal done that was way closer to my side of the negotiation than his side. Because sometimes people just want to test you.
And again, you only learn that once you walk out regretting the decision you made because you got lowballed and you were desperate to take it. I had a client recently who I'm working with a really senior member of their team, a massive company. It's for an app that almost everybody has on their phone. And everything's going super well. And then when it comes to talking about the price, I get moved to the procurement department. The procurement's job is to get the best price. They asked me for a price, and I just said politely, I can't do that. And they went, okay, and we moved forward. And I'm so glad that I held my nerve and held my position and trusted the value that I was creating and the relationship that I was building long term. but oh my God, you feel it. And you have to steady yourself on an external piece of advice, which is why coaching and mentoring and working with people is so important. And it's not that they're having a go at you, it's just that was that person's job. And that's what they have to do. But those lived experiences, and what's really interesting about communication, whether you are pitching to investors or you're talking at stage at a conference or you're presenting to your team, those moments there's no rewind, you can't start them again, there's no editing, it's a live moment. And so you learn by doing, and it's the after reflection where you kind of go, oh, I really messed up, or, I should have done better. And then lived experiences.
I think it goes back. I do this with founders, and I try to keep it as professional as possible when I give them analogies. But I really consider pitching like dating. I always have. You can't be too eager. You can't be too desperate. You can't talk too much. You have to read the other person's reactions to your comments to get a feel. You might be perfectly compatible, but if you blow the entrance date or the entrance conversation, you have no chance. You could be soulmates. Like founders and investors could be soulmates. They need this, you need this, you're all going to make billions. But if you blow that intro interview, it's done. It's very true. You both are there because there's interest. You're both are in the room because there's interest. You wouldn't be on the date or in the room if there wasn't interest. But if you don't get that first impression, that first flub, that first disagreement out of the way, you really don't know who you're in the room with.
It's that you're surrounded by those mousetraps, and one wrong move, mousetrap goes off, and the conversation's over. So the dating analogy is perfect, because it is, like you say, there's potential, there's interest, there's a glimmer. It's yours to lose. It's for you to make that mistake and drop the ball and to say the wrong thing. And you're more likely to say the wrong thing by not shutting up, talking too much, right? And so less is so much more.
Yeah, and I try to tell founders that pitching isn't a numbers game. There's a lot of coaches out there, a lot of VCs out there, a lot of other things out there, consultants that say it's a numbers game. We're going to pitch 100 groups. You're going to get 20 who want a second meeting, and out of that 20, you're going to get 5 who want to write a check. And then you have to negotiate. That's true. On one side of that coin. On the other side of that coin, and this is what we do at ARIISE Partners so well, we take that 100 and we try to get rid of 50 of them out of the gate because they're not serious. They're taking a meeting because they want to fill an hour on their agenda for their bosses. Because there's a quota, if people don't know that, founders don't know that, there's a quota that these VCs have to have so many meetings, so many pitches, so many hearings, so many checks a quarter. If they don't hit those quotas, they lose their job. Or at least get blackballed on some level inside the company. So they're going to take meetings. And so when these founders are like, oh, I got 10 meetings coming up, that doesn't impress me at all. I said, how many of them have talked to you about the specifics of the company? How many of them have shown genuine interest in the industry? How many of them have invested recently in the industry? Those are the questions that founders are like blown away by. Like, oh, I didn't even think to ask about that. Well, now you're going on a date with a model, and you don't even know if the model can speak English. And it's going to be a bad date. You don't want to have that kind of meeting. So that's what I try to tell founders is it's just the number of meetings does lead to more. There is a numbers game element to it, but it's not everything. And when you're in the room, pitching properly is going to help close more percentages.
It's that alignment, that pre-filtering. I work with somebody who, during the pandemic, lost his job. He was a pilot. And ever since he sat in the plane as a 5-year-old on a trip, he said, I want to be a pilot. And that's what he did. And then COVID said, no, you're not. Job's over. He got a phone call Sunday night. Don't come in tomorrow. We're not flying, grounded. It's career over. And he took that opportunity to say, well, actually, I could reinvent regional air travel. And first time founder, wasn't planning to be a founder, wanted to be a pilot, but had to make do with the new situation. So we write his pitch deck, and we have a high net worth individual in our sites that's warmed up. Everybody likes each other. We just need to make the pitch, and he goes in and pitches. That plan completely changed. And then the founder, the pilot's partner, gave him a book, and in that book was a case study of somebody with a lot of money, a lot of resources, and the founder realized they really aligned on values. And so the founder sent this guy an email, cold email, and 2 weeks later he gets a phone call, 2-minute phone call, out of the blue, unscheduled. The guy with the money's phoning up and it's like, how are you going to do this? How are you going to do this? How are you going to do this? The founder was able to answer that pitch on the phone. And then the guy with the money goes, I like it, I'm in. 18 months later, he gets the money. And this guy pitched to 2 people and got his money because he was incredibly aligned on values and he approached the right person with the right pitch. So it's the complete opposite of the numbers game. If he'd done the
Value
numbers
alignment
game,
is a great way of getting that to a point. That's really what it is. And whether you're using a service like ours or a coach like you, or you're using the innumerous downloading of the lists online that exist with no help. You don't know if the list is up to date. You don't know if the email works. You don't even know if it's the right phone number. But hey, it says an industry, and I'm in that industry, and oh, that's great. The 2 or 3 biggest things I find going back to alignment is you have to know your check size. If you can't pitch BlackRock to invest in an ice cream startup that needs 200 grand. They're not the right fit. And then there's another misnomer. The second thing I always find founders make the mistake on is the numbers game we talked about. The alignment first, numbers second, versus numbers first, and then you find your alignment during the pitches. Can we just pause and talk about planning a pitch versus winging it? You have to be telling your guys, your guys and girls, your customers, you have to be telling your clients, isn't there a level of scripting?
So this is really interesting. So when we made, back to the example of the pilot, we made a classic pitch deck that had all the slides, all the advice tells you need. We passed that pitch deck to multiple people. We got loads of input. We revisioned, we revised. It was really great. The process was really thorough. And so when I got the feedback later that the guy got the money, I was like, how did the pitch deck work? And the founder's like, didn't use the pitch deck. And I'm like, no, again. Like my identity is wrapped up in the pitch deck, and like, I didn't, what? Tell me what happened. And he goes, the pitch was in my head because of the process that we went through, because we went on such a granular level, scripting and revising and being really thorough on how we talked about the business. He had the confidence to let go of the pitch deck and just do the phone call.
And see, that's what I tell founders too on our side is I tell founders, you got to do the work. It's almost like an athlete. You work a muscle, you do a swing of a bat or whatever. It's a muscle memory. And if you get to the point where you practiced it and you're all nervous about, oh my God, I forgot to say a sentence on slide 6. No, you're in the wrong direction here. Get to a point where it's an organic feel, but you know your talking points. Because to your point about authenticity will carry the day with investors.
1000%. And like really interesting is like there's two types of people that you see. There's people who like to memorize their script, and there's people who like to improvise. It comes down to sort of individual preferences and learning styles. But when I sort of realized that, I was like, first of all, you need to internalize to then externalize. Like if you don't know your idea inside out in a really deep way, then you're going to worry, like what you just said about forgetting a sentence, and then that's going to reverberate and compound chaos where you're completely off script. and you're going to seem like you can only do it with the script. So again, the pilot, imagine if the phone rings, the pilot picks up the phone, and the person goes, "It's me. You sent me an email 2 weeks ago." And if that founder said, "Oh, can I run and get my pitch deck?" Bang, red flag. The investor would have been, "No. If you can't do this without the pitch deck, you're not the person for me." So to let go, where people are hanging on to a crutch because that's the only way they can do it. And so when I hear people say, "Oh, I need to memorize the script," I'm like, no, you don't need to memorize the script, because that's going to turn you into a robot. And we don't need any more AI robotic performances right now. We need people with all their flaws.
I'm waiting for the AI to hit pitching and have a bot voice pitching digitally on a pre-selected list of investors, and you log into a Zoom or a call and the AI is pitching for the founder and they think that's efficient to save their time. I'm waiting for that to happen because I think it's going to.
When AI dropped, whenever it was recently, and then like it was like 10 AI tools that you need, I'd always go to the presentation one. And then it would basically be some demo of you type in a box and then it creates a slide with a picture on the left and 3 bullet points. And I'm like, but that's the problem, right? We don't need, that's not a solution. That's just automating a task. So, it always reminds me of that scene in Fantasia when Mickey Mouse is the sorcerer's apprentice and he casts a spell on the broom and the bucket to do the cleaning. And then he has to chop it up and it just, yeah. And I'm like, that's what's going to happen with just squeezing toothpaste out the tube quicker. That's going to make a mess.
How many movies are about the guy who got greedy or wanted it too fast and it all fell apart?
Like all of them.
I think it was either the Greeks or someone who said there's only 8 stories in the world.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I think 80% of those 8 stories is that story of the guy who got his eyes too big or wanted too much or wanted everything and it all fell apart.
And didn't put the work in, which is exactly what you just said. Wasn't prepared to do the work.
Yeah, like I said, I think the AI thing is a different topic for a different discussion, but honestly, I think that I'm going to say it out loud. I think that the younger generations are so drugged up for immediate gratification. They don't want or know how to, and I think that's more the point. I don't think it's they don't want to. I think they don't know how work leads to good things. I think that they're geared towards click and get, click and get, click and get. And they don't realize that if you carve a chair out of a piece of wood, the satisfaction, the quality, the reputation, the families, the love, the respect you get is so much bigger than ordering a chair on eBay. I'm not saying that you have to do that, because obviously you don't want to waste your time on needless adventures. But I think that they're not used to doing something that takes a long time and reaping a reward for it, because so much of the world's not built that way anymore.
Yes, and it comes back to what we were saying about there's only certain lessons you learn by feeling the pain and failing. When somebody called time out on me in a meeting and walked out and said I'd blown it, like I was only going to learn that lesson one way. And I think that, not to go down the rabbit hole of AI, but like you have to feel that burn and then you have to learn that there's another way of doing it.
Yeah, you're not wrong about that. So let's jump into that, because I think that is a good segue into our segment of who helped you and who screwed you in your career. Because we all have that one story where that one guy or that one girl gave us a break and we needed it at that moment. And we also have the story where we just totally got screwed by somebody. Like there was that moment where we needed something to happen and it didn't happen, and then like the path converged. It went a different direction for our careers. So what do you have for that, for both those two questions?
I'd say it's probably me. Like I've made amazing opportunities happen for myself. And then in, half a step later, I fucked it up myself. And that's, I suppose, this sort of conflicting ambition and boldness, and then at the same time, huge amounts of self-doubt and imposter syndrome and all those other things. I feel like there's opportunities where I have talked myself out of doing great things, and I've sort of ended up by my own inadequacy being able to sort of seize it. I like that. I've often said, like, if there was a zombie apocalypse, I'd be one of those people that gets wiped out at the very beginning. I wouldn't be a survivor.
I know I'm the exact opposite of that. I'd be the guy who's crawling and biting zombie arms off at the last hill, on the last mountain, on the last battle of the last human stand. That would be me. I just can't help myself. I have a desire to lead and a desire to survive on a level that I don't know many people have. And so that's my thing. My big mistakes, to talk to your point, I agree with you. I think you're your own biggest enemy and your own biggest ally. I think that's a very wise way of looking at the who helped you and who screwed you. I will say that without exception, there's the questions you always hear, right? Those little nugget questions, like, oh, if you can go back and change one thing. My answer to that question is always, I would go back and make me choose the other path. There's that one little nugget where I made a mistake or said something wrong or was rude to the wrong person or did something, that's the moments I remember. It's go back and going, oh man, I was in a meeting where a guy could have wrote a check and I would still be making money off that money to this day and helping 10 more founders, 20 more founders a month. If I would have just not been an overtalker and not been a jackass, insecure little boy at the big man's table.
Ego is such a, it rears its head at the wrong moment. And it gets that surge of confidence at the wrong moment, and it makes those crossroad moments that you've just described, where you're like, oh, if only I'd just been a little bit more that way, then I could have navigated it. But then again, we make the decisions we make because of who we are, and so I went to China in 2004 from London. And massive crossroads moment, career, relationships, friends, all sorts of different reasons. And I take myself back and I'm like, what were the butterfly effects? What were the small things that could have completely redirected everything? But then I look at what I've got, my family, my career, my work, my opportunities, and I'm like, but I love where I am.
I mean,
and
to speak to that really briefly, is the biggest mistake I ever made was who I married. But I got the greatest kid in the history of the world from it. And it's the easiest example to give to people. It's like, there's no reason I should have married that person. There was a million red flags, and we were completely incompatible on so many levels, and we had 10 chances to break up and just found a way to stay together. And then I have this perfect little human who is the world, the universe. And I would not be able to have her if all of those red flags weren't ignored. If I didn't power through like the zombie apocalypse leader on the top of the hill, if I didn't power through, I wouldn't have my favorite human. She wouldn't even be on the planet. So, like, to your point, just because you make a mistake doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean it stays bad forever. But yeah, I mean, that's the wisdom behind the biggest helper and the biggest herder of my career is myself. I think that's something that every founder needs to listen to and to take stock of.
And also not to dwell on, not to sort of beat ourselves up over it. I think it's just to acknowledge it, respect it, and move forward, and allow those moments of hindsight to inform future decisions, because you're actually thinking about it and you're self-aware enough to embrace the fact that you can make these failures or bad choices, and they don't define you.
Well, that's another piece of advice to others that I'd like to hit on, because I think you hit on something even bigger. A lot of people are like, oh, you made the mistake, move on. I don't live that way. I dwell in the mistake long enough to extract the data points, the learning lessons, the adjustments I need, then I move on. And I find personally, this might not be for everyone, but personally, if I'm dwelling on a subject or a mistake or a missed opportunity, it means I haven't learned everything from it yet. I feel like my internal body's like, you're not done with that topic yet. You got to go back and think about it again.
Yeah, you got to clean the corners.
Yeah, that's my experience, the human experience, for me at least. But my advice to founders would always be, you got to learn from your mistakes. And there's another phrase that always pops up, fail fast. I don't think you want to fail fast. I think you want to fail thoroughly.
Yes, completely. Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Then you go right down to the bottom. Yeah.
Like failing and having a surface level like screw up and saying, well, I'm not going to pursue that anymore. I'm leaving. That's failing fast. And that's a lot of what the immediate gratification generation does. They don't have an immediate sale or an immediate investor or an immediate growth. They quit the startup. But I think it's more fail thoroughly. Exhaust that opportunity, that idea, that effort. And then when you know that there's nowhere to ring the bell in that loss, then you move on. Because, everything from Facebook to Amazon, they all were a corner of a big mistake. But the founder kept digging and digging and digging and found that nugget of the niche they were missing.
It's being owning or being accountable to that failure, and like you say, to be thorough and to sort of go, because if you fail too fast and then you brush it aside, you're never really taking responsibility, or it's always somebody else's fault, or I failed and I'm leaving it behind too fast. You're not doing the forensics or the digging around, like you said, thorough investigation of why it was a failure. And again, it's like, what is that sweet spot between moving on too fast and dwelling on it, that it defines you? It's like you've got to know when you've harvested enough of the insights and then move forward and not get stuck.
That's as good of an advice as I can give to any founder. It's, like I said, the thorough fail. Because if you dig through it, you're going to learn more lessons than just the surface of why the idea didn't take hold in the marketplace. You're going to find other things. My discipline was off. My work ethic was off. My team was off. We had the wrong lawyer or the wrong tech guy or the wrong whatever. Like, you're going to learn more than just, it didn't work. On to the next one. If you dig through it and say, why? And why and why? I always try to explain to founders that you have to almost be like a 5-year-old. You have to be like the kid who says why. And then you answer, why? And you answer, why? You keep doing that, you're going to get to the bottom of why the startup failed and what you can draw from it. Why the venture failed and draw from it. You're not going to get there on, it failed, I'm moving on. I'm going to, on to the next thing.
Yeah, it's that curiosity.
Because we screwed up 75 ways for Poser. And I can easily say market timing was everything, because it was. We could have figured out the other 74 screw-ups if we had runway, but when Peloton came in the market, and when Nike came in the market, and when ESPN came in the market for stay-at-home exercise, we got obliterated. We don't have anywhere near that budget. But if I just stopped there and said, the big guys screwed us, I lost the investors' money, we're moving on. But I dug into it, and I'm like, my tech guy didn't really work fast enough. He was slow on that. We didn't get the 4.0 out fast enough. We didn't really have the right marketing dollars or the right team in place to do the marketing to get it out there. We don't have to have 80% market share. We could have had 2% and still been a multi-million-dollar company. But it's easy to look at the fast fail and say, COVID hit, everyone came in and we got hammered. But really why we failed was we had 6 months to get it out and get it working and get it traction, and we didn't do it. That's the thoroughness of the failure.
And that's the hard thing to say, isn't it? Because where does that put the emphasis? it's on you guys, right? So you can't, there's no hiding, there's nowhere to hide. It's like, that was ours. We own that.
Now, some of the hardest conversations I ever had was telling founders or investors I lost their money. I mean, that's as accountability as it gets. You had someone who bought into you and your idea and your work ethic and your vision and your friends. And you have to go back to them and say, I failed at all level. That's a hard conversation. And that's a conversation a lot of founders don't want to have.
I mean, that's beyond founder. You know, there's so many of these moments where it's like, it's within the founder context, but it's like life lessons, isn't it? Like, you take that lesson into everything in life. Like you said, with your daughter being the best person on the planet for you, it's like, but you and your ex-wife were able to sort of go, it's not working for us. And you didn't stay in that place that wasn't healthy.
It was much more dramatic. It wasn't an adult level goodbye, we're not working out situation. It was a Led Zeppelin, flaming album cover to rock music level failure. It was big. It was big. But yeah, to your point though, like,
but some people, how many people are still trapped like that because they won't have that tough conversation?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the facing of the mirror is the hardest face there is. Actually, I think there's two. My background is architecture. I was a designer, architect, engineering mindset in undergraduate. I shifted and I climbed the ladder out of it. But there's a phrase called the blank page, where you're staring at a white wall as a painter or a canvas. You're staring at a piece of paper or a computer screen as a writer, or you're staring at a empty piece of land as a developer, architect, engineer, whatever. And you're staring at this, the abyss of everything I do now is a potential mistake. So you get frozen in not making any decisions because it's easier to delay than it is to move forward. That's a level of fear, and I had to work on the anxiety on that stuff for years to kind of get over the first paintbrush, right? The first stroke. But there's also, to your point, it's the after it's over and you did fail, looking in the mirror, saying, how did I screw up? Because the guy who looks in the mirror now first, before he does an idea, then looks in the mirror throughout the process, and then looks in the mirror at the end of the process, whether it be a success or failure, that's the guy I want to go back and put it on that table with that billionaire when I was 31 years old. That's the guy I want to be on that room. Not that guy then, not the 31-year-old, but the 41-year-old who wants to go back, and that's the guy I want there.
Well, you create that time machine and you are going to be a gazillionaire.
Well, no, absolutely. But I mean, but that's to our point about us being the theme of the episode is clearly like, being holding yourself accountable and being your own worst enemy. But that's the whole thing. It's like the seasoning. I mean, the gray hair is real. It's earned. It's the seasoning. You get so much better at it, and all we try to do as counsel, as consultants, as coaches, as mentors, is to try to get these kids to not make the mistakes we did. But to your point earlier, screwing up is the best teacher.
Yeah, it's like, what are we really going to achieve? Because there's all this sort of hype and pressure in the keyhole of social media of people sort of saying how much they've achieved by such a young age, and then it puts so much pressure on people. But we're all on our own timeline, we're all on our own race, and to have this sort of self-reflection and the ability to go, well, actually, maybe I wasn't ready at 31, sat at a table with a billionaire, but maybe it's really going to come now. And again, I'll show you. This is my process. Can you see my blocks? So when I talk with people about presenting and presentations, I'm like, base level is your mindset. So if anyone's listening on audio, this is 5 Lego blocks, and that's your mindset. And then on top of those 5 Lego blocks is 4 Lego blocks, and that's your strategy. Why am I pitching? Why am I communicating? And then on top of that, you got your 3 Lego blocks, which is your message. On top of the message is 2 Lego blocks. That's your performance. And right at the top, so it's like a staircase. Right at the top is 1 Lego block. That's your slide deck. Now, if you don't have the base layer of the mindset, forget the rest of it. And most people start upside down with the slide deck.
100%.
And they do the hard work of polishing the slides and pitching in their own head. And then when they get some feedback that maybe it's not the right thing, they push back because their ego won't let them listen to the advice.
Oh, it's perfect. Yeah, it's absolutely perfect. That's a perfect way of explaining it.
I mean, I figured this out last year, and I'm 47, and I've been doing presentations for like the last 15 years, but I couldn't, it's taken me this long to
synthesize.
Yes, to purify and to a bunch of Lego blocks that took out my kids' Lego box. It's crazy.
My daughter pitched a company to me when she was 6. Because she heard me and you on panels, right? Every month she heard Martin's voice on the screen, and she saw Dad doing his thing, and so she wants attention, right? And kids typically adapt to what their parents' hobbies are in order to get involved with their parents, because all they really want is the interaction, right? So she goes in her room and she starts sketching up her ideas. And she's listening to us month after month after month. And she's quietly, I don't even know this is happening. She's in her room taking notes at age 7, 8, 9 years old. And she's coming up with business plans in her own way from just listening to you and me and Elena and others on a panel or a podcast. She's coming up with ideas in her room. And then one day she hits me with one of them, and it was good. And I was like, wow, you're 8 years old. How come I can't get 28-year-olds to listen? Like, you know, how do I translate that enthusiasm into some of the people who don't listen as much?
Again, it's mindset, right? If you don't have the growth mindset, if you're going to resist because somebody gives you a different perspective or wants to share feedback that it doesn't quite align with your keyhole view of the world, then you're going to... So this all came because I was working with a group of founders. They were going on to a competition, 10 founders, stage for 4 minutes, talk to the panelists for 5 minutes. Somebody wins a whole bundle of prizes. So we do a pre-session beforehand, get everybody ready. Rachel was obviously nervous. She had a script pinned next to her computer. She was reading the script and she got through it. And I was like, you've buried the lead. If we move the middle to the beginning and we da-da-da-da-da. And she looked at me and she went, okay. And we had 2 sessions. She was the only person that came to both sessions. She waited through the second session and said, can I pitch again? I was like, of course, you're here. Let's pitch. She pitched. The whole room went silent. They were like, huh? And she implemented the feedback that made sense to her. Not 100% of it, like whatever, it was about 60%, whatever it was. She then goes on to the event live, and she's nervous, her voice is shaking. She does the sort of 4-minute pitch, and then she walks off stage, and everyone's like, no, come back, you've got to do the Q&A. She was really nervous, but she didn't bury that. It became part of her performance, and she won.
Because she just demonstrated in live fashion that she can adapt, adjust, bury the ego, learn from her mistake, and do better. That's all investors want to see from founders. We're giving you this money as a runway to screw up more. We want you to screw up more. That's another thing that founders don't get. They're trying to make the perfect box the first time. Make it functional. Get to sales. God willing, get the profit. Then go pitch. Because even if it's a ugly little gray box, they see the work it took to get there, and you can prove the process to get there. I see so many founders make the mistake of carrying in the beautiful white box on the presentation. This is what we're going to build with your money. We're going to do this. Future tense. We're going to fix this. We're going to build the team. We're going to have the best thing. The guys who get the money are the guys who come in with the gray box and say, well, it used to be a black box, now it's gray. We learned a lot. And we think eventually we're going to get to like a light gray box, and we might get to a white box, but it's going to cost X amount of dollars to get to the white box. That's the guys who get the money.
Yeah, and if it becomes a ping box, we're not going to bullshit you that we're going to, we're going to own that failure and that pivot, and we're going to communicate properly.
Oh, I love when I hear a VC ask the question, tell me about a failure of your career. I love that question. And it's like the job interview, like, oh, where do you see yourself in 5 years? That's a white box question, right? That's the crystalline question. I like the employers and the VCs and the investors who say, tell me one of your failures. Mine, Poser, was my big one because we put so much money and time into it, and there were so many reasons to fail, and the big one was the timing. But that's a great story because I can demonstrate to any founder or investor or private equity guy or family office rep, I bet big. I took all of my profits from my first venture that was great, put it into my second venture, and I pissed it all away. But I'm still doing it.
And so when you talk about that, when you see it coming again on the horizon, and you sort of say, well, we need to speed up, guys, because we need to do it faster. People are like, why? It's the weekend. But it's like, well, let me tell you that time that we took our sweet time and then crunched the pandemic and then crunch Peloton, then crunch Nike, crunch boom, 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 boom. And we were like literally the first people that got wiped out in the zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, we were the Martins of that world.
The guy in the opening scene of the movie that just out of nowhere.
Yeah, you were there's a hilarious old joke in American cinema that if you're surrounded by white kids in a horror movie and you're the black kid, you're gonna get whacked first.
Yeah.
Like it was like every movie from like the 60s until like the 90s did that. And it was hysterical. You knew you weren't getting out of it alive if you were that dude. And it's like, that's why I tell founders, that's the black box versus the gray box versus the white box theory that we have, that we explain to our clients. It's, you got to come in with a gray box. You got to admit it's not perfect. You got to admit you screwed up. You got to admit you burned money or you had the wrong team. That gives authenticity. That does break down the egos. That does create a nomenclature and a shorthand with investors. You want to tell the bad stories. And so many kids don't want to tell the bad stories. They're like, oh no, they're not going to invest in me if they see something wrong. It's like the date. Go back to the date.
Yeah.
I know more couples.
Perfect. Alarm bells.
I know more couples who've lasted the longest because they were upfront with their screw ups. I blew my last marriage. I was a cheater. I talked too much. I blew the cash. I had a chemical dependency. Owning that level of, I'm the reason that other things screwed up. That's so powerful.
Yeah, and to not hide those things is hard because things are out of your control. But then there's that sort of Obi-Wan Kenobi moment when you let go of the perceived control and you get a much greater freedom and you elevate way beyond that limit, right? And that's when you asked me originally, it's like, who's the person that's sort of given me the most opportunities and also sort of screwed me over? And I was like, well, I don't want to blame somebody else. Ultimately, I have to a thorough failure means that it was my responsibility and I have to own that, and I can't sort of throw anyone under the bus. I have to own it.
Well, there was a bank that hammered us on a project. They were a vulture hard money lender. And you know what? We didn't read the fine print. If I would have sat down instead of being all jazzed up to get a big loan and launch the next venture and go, because, oh my God, we're going to compete with Apple tomorrow, right? Whatever. All that raw enthusiasm. If we'd have just sat down and called a lawyer, spent the money, reviewed the documents, reviewed the fine print, we would have saw that there was a piece of it that said they can charge us any fee they want for an extension on a loan. Yeah, it was at their discretion. And so we had no built-in extension language and no built-in extension fee, no flat fee. It was at their discretion. And when we went over budget and over time, we got destroyed. And I could sit there all day long and say that bank, greedy, dirty, predatorial, and they are. They're a dirtball firm, and if I see any of those bankers again in my career, I will publicly shame them. But the thorough failure, and we succeeded. We actually made money from that venture, but we could have done way better if we had just stopped and looked and read and taken a couple extra days to review everything. And that's another advice I give the founders is, please never skimp on insurance and never skimp on legal. I know it's expensive. I know it's unheard ofly, like it's not fair. I know that they don't do a lot of work, and especially with lawyers, you're doing a lot of the work for them. But don't skimp on that, because you're not going to be able to put the genie back in the bottle after you sign a contract. So the last thing I want to cover real quick is in your own business, right? Because if ARIISE Partners is anything, we fix and scale businesses. That's what we do. And we fix them in 100 different ways. But addressing the problem is up to the founder and us to communicate and find the problem. Going back to that thorough failure, right? Digging in the corners. What's one thing your firm, your business, keeps running into and has, I wouldn't call it a roadblock, but has an opportunity to find a way around it?
It's taken me so long to get product market fit. And I've spent a lot of energy and effort communicating what I think is interesting and not really understanding my audience. And the irony is that when I work with people, I say the first thing you should start with is really understanding your audience. And again, it's like you can't see the wood for the trees when it's your own forest. You can figure out somebody else's mess, but you can't do your own. And I think that I spent a long time communicating to the wrong people, who, when we would get onto a call and they expressed interest and signaled that they wanted to work on something, they didn't have the mindset or the budget to really go the duration of what this sort of takes. And so I was really at the bottom of the pile instead of talking to the top of the pile.
So how have you addressed the fix of that, or how can we help you address the fix of that? Is there a more crystalline problem that you've run into?
I suppose I've now got a lot more focused on saying who I actually work with and what I help them achieve. And my previous background is you started off in architecture, I started off in graphic design, and graphic design allows you to solve many, many problems creatively. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to do presentations. And a bit like an hourglass, it went from wide in terms of design to narrow in terms of presentations, but then it widens out again. It says, well, who do you make presentations for? And when the pandemic hit and I wasn't in China anymore, and I was in the UK, I was like, startups. And now I'm actually like, well, not startups raising money, but founders on stage growing their influence. And then even more specifically, female founders on stage talking at conferences about what they've achieved, and in like founder-led marketing for female founders.
What's the best way for founders to find you?
The only place I have any time and attention is on LinkedIn.
How long do you need to work with a female founder or any founder to get them to a place where you feel you're breaking through? Is there a kind of a timeline where you can see repeated, the founder kind of breaks through after X amount of time?
About, let's say, well, there's one, Shelley came to me, she messaged me in the morning, she had a speech that evening, and we completely changed her talk around on a half an hour phone call. And then she went to that event, she spoke, and she got people asking her to speak at their event, people asking for her book, and people connecting on LinkedIn. She was only on stage for 3 minutes, but she did a laser focused 3 minutes, and it got her huge ROI. And that she did that in a day. But if we take it back to the Lego blocks, she has the right mindset. Now, we don't want everybody to work in that sort of crazy sprint. So let's say that you're speaking at an event, you want to start talking to me minimum 2 weeks, preferably 4 or 5 weeks, because it does need that time. It's a bit like making bread. You've got to let the yeast rise. You've got to have time between conversations to think about what we've talked about and what we've demonstrated in practice for you to really reap the benefits. So 3 to 6 weeks is perfect.
Now, do you do any of the bigger events? The Toronto, the JITX in Dubai, the startup events, do you go to those and talk to founders to market yourself, or is it organic word of mouth people who find you?
I go to events in the UK at the moment. So I'm sort of limited geographically to the southwest of England and London and Midlands of the UK. I am talking to one group in America about maybe going and doing some training there. But yes, the best thing I can do is get to an event. I do my sketching. I listen and sit in the audience. I sketch what speakers are saying, show them the sketches, start the right kind of conversations, and then basically use the sketching as a lead into like, oh, I can help you at your next conference talk.
So again, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Ryan.
Martin Barnes with 8 Seconds to Connect. Find him on LinkedIn, his primary source. He can represent anywhere around the world, not just the Southwest UK, although that's where he's currently geographically held to.
I do have one more call to action, if I may. One more thing. I've got a survey. I've got a 15-question self-assessment, and it's like the title is, "Are you getting ROI from speaking at events?" And it's 15 questions that are going to prompt you to think, am I thinking strategically about speaking at events as a founder? And if that questionnaire, which we can put a link in the show notes, if that questionnaire inspires you to have a conversation, then I would love to jump on a call and dig more into that. And so that's my sort of, LinkedIn is where you'll find me pushing out content on a regular basis and engaging with people. But my self-assessment, my 15 question, takes 2 minutes, is the sparks of ideas where you're like, ooh, I could be so much better. And that's what I'd love people to do.
We actually have an internal questionnaire to the company as well, where it's more of a psychological assessment. It's basically a quiet ego test. And if they don't pass the ego test, we don't work with them because we can't break through to coach them.
Exactly. Foundation level of mindset.
Yeah, it's correct. The mindset's the most important thing. If you want to be coached, if you are coachable, if you're hungry to get further, you do need help. I don't think any founder has it all figured out, including the CEOs that make $20 million a year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, it was great having you on. I always enjoy our conversations. We'll have you on again soon. And thanks for being the guinea pig on the pilot episode. That's even better.
I love it. Thank you, Ryan. It's been a real pleasure talking with you.
Great. Well, good luck to you and have a great evening with your family.
Cheers, man.